Hello and welcome to the Alpine Valley School podcast. I'm your host, Mark Gallivan. This is the 28th episode of the Alpine Valley School podcast. You can find show notes for this episode at alpinevalleyschool.com/podcast/EP28 for episode 28. When people are first exposed to our school and the freedom that students experience here, their initial impression is often that this is a free-for-all. After all, if people are allowed to do what they want, wouldn't it be total chaos? The truth is that it sometimes is. There's noise, there's activity, and sometimes it is a bit unruly. However, the definition of freedom, as we define it at Alpine Valley School, is not simply doing whatever you want. Students, and indeed staff as well, have the ability to choose how we spend our time, who we spend it with, and where we gather. But there are still laws we must all follow. We must all treat each other with respect, clean up after ourselves, and respect property both belonging to the school and to other people. The school meeting law book is a critical element of life at school, as is judicial committee, which we discussed on a previous episode. In fact, school meeting members are handed a great deal of responsibility on a regular basis. The entire running of the school comes down to the contribution of school meeting members, elected to various positions such as school meeting chair, attendance clerk, and so forth, not to mention serving as voting members in judicial committee. Without these critical functions, the school would not work. In addition to being responsible for ourselves, school meeting members also bear responsibility for their part in the community as a whole, and for keeping our school the kind of place we all want to be part of. What this boils down to on a day-to-day basis is typically individual choices, the decisions that we make both for ourselves and the community as a whole. All of which begs the question, if students are allowed to make their own decisions, won't they decide to do things that aren't beneficial to them? I posed this question to a group of AVS graduates, and here's what they had to say.
I think yes. Yes, they will, and I think that's a good thing. I would answer that question with another question, which is, as an adult, are all of your choices beneficial to you? And then I think, why should our kids learn any other way other than being able to have the freedom to make their own choices, learn from those consequences, and then make better choices?
And here's my theory. I have a theory about when a student from a traditional learning environment comes into AVS, there's definitely a decompression period, which makes lots of parents nervous, is because they see kids just, what they perceive as goofing around all day. But during that time, I was able to pursue things that mattered to me and to discover what those things were. Because if you're in a classroom situation, you don't always have the space that you need to discover what you even want to do. And after a student figures out what they want to do, everything else just falls into place.
I think it's worth considering your own life, even in the past 5-10 years. If you haven't gone to school in that time, if you have gone to school, either way, you've learned an incredible amount. You might not realize it because it's sort of a part of your baseline, but kids are doing that, but at an accelerated rate because that's what they're made for, and they have so much to take in. And no matter what they're doing at AVS, they're learning how to be effective people.
I don't really like the idea that certain activities are not beneficial. I think most all activities have some benefit to them. By the same vein, I would say if you let somebody take advanced math classes and they hate math, that's not beneficial to them. So, in this vein, probably saying aren't they just going to sit around and get on the computer, and that's not beneficial to them? But how is it not, right? On the computer, they could find different information, they could learn different things, right? So there's benefits to, I think, all activities, and the beauty of AVS is that it gives you that option to find the activities that are beneficial to you versus a more traditional school where you're kind of given activities, whether they're beneficial to you or not.
I don't know if you can be self-directed and have a non-beneficial or good learning event. No matter how small or weird something might be, you can gain something from it. You can learn something from it. I think as long as you're not placed into something against what you would like to do or are forced to learn something, I think everything has its benefit. Maybe you don't realize it at the time, but perhaps on reflection, you pick something up from it.
I'd say for the most part, no. And the reason that is because although at the time it may not seem beneficial, oftentimes a lot of the experiences that were just sort of like idle play or cures for boredom or just doing whatever ended up being, at least for me, some of my best memories, and some of the things that I look back on now as an adult. But there's certainly an aspect of, doing things just for fun that ultimately won't benefit you in the long run, apart from the fact that it leads to a happier childhood. So I'd say all the stuff that kids do throughout the day at AVS mostly does benefit the student directly, and all the other things end up benefiting indirectly. Whether it's you do something kind of stupid and you learn a good lesson from it, or whether it's just something that later you're like, wow, that was a waste of time, I'll never do that again. Ultimately, you benefit from all of those things.
What is or is not beneficial, like this is by its nature kind of a question with an inherent bias. Who gets to decide what's beneficial and what's not beneficial? In a Sudbury school and system, the democratic nature of it encourages kids to participate in the system and to create their own laws that they want to abide by, and to choose the activities that they're going to participate in. And I mean, how many of us as adults now can say that we always 100% of the time choose only activities that are beneficial to us? I mean, I think one of the greatest values that I took from AVS was being treated as an equal by adults. These are things that students are given the leeway to develop their own tools for, rather than being kind of like funneled through this bubble where certain things have arbitrary value. I mean, I think that AVS is a much better microcosm of what it's like to exist in the real world.
So I think it's really hard to predict what will be beneficial to someone else. And even beyond that, I think it's really hard to predict what will be beneficial to yourself. Thinking back to my time at the school, really anything that I did, including the stuff that might appear academic, like studying Aristotle, or, a project like developing film in the darkroom and printing my own photos and that kind of stuff. I don't know that you can make the argument that those things were really, in a direct kind of causal way, beneficial to me later on. That's certainly not why I did them. I did them because I loved them, and I happened to get something out of that. And I think that for most people, if they look back at their own lives, they probably didn't have a clear sense of why what they were doing benefited them today. And I think that that's pretty normal.
My internal baseline is that most people are curious. Most people are good, right? Like that's just what I believe. And so, and I also think that we all do things that are bad for us, right? and both serve a purpose. And the goal is for that inner pilot light to be the leader, and that the things that we do maybe that aren't so good for us still serve that path somehow, right? And all of that is navigating being a human. And I think that the sooner we come to terms with that as individuals, the better we can then become at self-mastery and kind of modulating that for ourselves, so that we can strive to, be better people and brighter lights and all of that.
I would counter that question with another question, which is beneficial according to whom? Probably one of the hardest things that I think parents have to do when they send their kids to an alternative school like a Sudbury school, like AVS, is trusting that their child is going to be fine and make the right choices. We don't always make the right choices, and you can't learn anything without making mistakes. You just kind of have to let go. I would argue that most of the things that they're going to do are going to be beneficial to them in some way. And really, the child is the only one who knows truly what's beneficial for them.
Failure is a great teacher, and while those lessons are not exactly easy, they are important. At Alpine Valley School, we do not shield our students from the difficult lessons of life, nor from the consequences of their choices. And while we all may not make decisions that are most beneficial for us, no matter our age, we always learn from each experience and can make a different choice the next time around. That, in itself, is one of the most important lessons there is. This is episode 28 of the Alpine Valley School podcast. You can find show notes for this episode at alpinevalleyschool.com/podcast/EP28 for episode 28. If you want to get in touch, you can find Alpine Valley School on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter by searching for us. If you want to send a message regarding the podcast specifically, you can send it to podcast@alpinevalleyschool.com. I do read all of your messages. As always, thanks for listening. I'm Mark Gallivan. This is the Alpine Valley School podcast, and we'll be back again soon with more stories of real learning for real life.